Hi, my name is Emily. I'm 28 years old, and for most of my life, I've been treated like a shadow at the edge of my own family. I wasn't raised with wealth, privilege, or the last name that opened doors. But I had something none of them ever noticed: my grandfather's love. He was the only one who ever saw me, really saw me. As a child, I'd sit with him under the old oak tree while the others played on yachts and posed for photos. He never cared that I wore hand-me-downs or that my mother was the forgotten daughter no one wanted to talk about. He told me stories, taught me how to think for myself, and reminded me that value doesn't live in gold or marble. It lives in character. When he passed away, I didn't expect anything. I didn't even know if I should attend the will reading. I imagined all those polished heirs in their designer suits and fake sympathy sneering the moment I walked in, but I went anyway. I went to say goodbye. I had no idea that my presence would ignite a storm, that behind every cruel smirk that day I was holding the truth, a truth that would change everything. And when they laughed, when they whispered behind my back, they had no idea that I was about to inherit it all. I still remember the envelope, heavy, off-white, with embossed gold lettering that spelled out the name of a law firm I had never heard of. It arrived on a rainy Thursday, tucked awkwardly into my mailbox like it didn't belong there. And truthfully, I didn't think it did. I had just come home from work, tired, soaked from the downpour, and emotionally numb after another long shift at the bookstore. My grandfather had passed away the week before. The funeral had been a blur of luxury cars, designer sunglasses hiding dry eyes, and forced condolences. I stood in the back, unnoticed, just the way they liked it. But now, here was this letter. Inside, the ink was cold and precise. You are formally invited to the reading of the last will and testament of Charles Montgomery Hayes. The proceeding will be held at the Hayes family estate on Saturday, 11 a.m. Attendance is required. Required? I held the paper in trembling hands, my mind racing. Surely this was a mistake. I wasn't one of them, not really. They never invited me to anything, not even holidays. My mother had been estranged from the family for years, written off as the rebellious daughter who married below her station. After she passed, I thought I had no place among the Hayeses, and honestly, they made it clear they agreed. But my grandfather didn't. He was the only one who wrote me letters, the only one who sent birthday cards, even after Mom died. And now, he'd included me in this. I knew what would happen. I'd walk into that mansion and every perfectly groomed cousin would stare like I'd tracked mud into a marble cathedral. They'd wonder what I was doing there, dressed in outlet store clothes and carrying nothing but quiet dignity. And they'd make sure I felt it, that I was less. But I also knew I had to go. Something told me this was more than just a formality. Something in me whispered that this was a door. And if I didn't walk through it, I might never know the truth my grandfather left behind. So I circled the date, held my breath, and started planning for the moment I would walk into the lion's den. Saturday arrived quicker than I expected. The sky was cloudless, as if the universe decided to shine a spotlight on the gathering I least wanted to attend. I stood in front of the Hayes estate, clutching the strap of my worn leather bag, trying to slow the rhythm of my heartbeat. The house was a monument to old money, all towering columns, ivy-covered stone, and windows that reflected the world like it didn't belong inside. It was exactly how I remembered it from childhood visits, only colder now. Like without my grandfather inside, the house had given up pretending to have a soul. The valet barely glanced at me as I walked past the Bentleys and Rolls-Royces. The front door opened, and I stepped into a world of polished marble, gold accents, and stairs sharper than crystal chandeliers. "Who let that in?" The voice came from the hallway. I didn't even have to look. I recognized my cousin Meredith's voice like a bruise that never quite healed. She appeared moments later, all silk and superiority, her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Surprised to see you," she said, her eyes scanning my shoes before meeting mine. "We thought you'd moved on from family matters." "I'm here for Grandpa," I said simply. "Oh, how sweet," she cooed, turning just enough to make sure everyone nearby could hear. "Still clinging to those little postcards he used to send? That's adorable." A few others chuckled. The room beyond the entry was full of them. Hayes cousins, uncles, spouses, and hangers-on. Women with diamonds that sparkled more than their smiles. Men in navy suits pretending they hadn't been waiting years for this exact day. The air was thick with anticipation and champagne, but I wasn't here for drinks or small talk. I was here because something told me my grandfather left a part of himself behind, and it had something to do with me. As I made my way to the far corner of the sitting room, I felt eyes on me from every direction. Whispers followed me like perfume. She looks tired. Probably wants a handout. I thought her mother was cut off years ago. No one offered a seat. So I stood back straight, eyes calm like Grandpa taught me. Let them talk, their noise doesn't define you. And then the room hushed. The double doors opened and Arthur Grayson, the family lawyer, stepped in, his black suit pressed, his face unreadable. "Shall we begin?" he said. It was time. Arthur Grayson placed a thick envelope on the polished mahogany table, the sound echoing in the tense silence of the room. Dozens of eyes followed the motion, but I noticed how none of them looked at me anymore, as if I'd become part of the furniture. Convenient to ignore, easy to dismiss. "I will now read the last will and testament of Gerald Henry Hayes," Arthur announced, unfolding the documents with ceremonial care. I took a shallow breath. The last time I heard Grandpa's name spoken aloud, it was during the eulogy I had to write, because no one else offered. The rest of them had been too busy planning brunch reservations after the funeral. Arthur's voice rang clear and precise. To my beloved family, I offer my final words not just as farewells, but as reflections. In life you revealed yourselves, not always with grace, not always with kindness, but with clarity." The crowd shifted, a few nervous coughs. Meredith's smile vanished. "To my children, Ellen, Marcus, and Julian, I leave what remains of the summer estate in Vermont to be shared, sold, or squandered as they see fit." Meredith's mother nodded, smug. So far, so good, at least for them. "To my grandchildren and their ever-expanding circle of entitlement, I leave nothing." The room gasped. Nothing? A murmur of outrage spread like spilled wine on linen. Meredith's cousin Devon stood up from his chair, whispering something furious to his wife, who turned 3 shades paler. Arthur didn't pause. He was just getting started. "To those who gathered around me when the lights were brightest, thank you for your company. But to those who showed up when it was dark, you showed me something far more valuable than bloodlines." And then my heart caught. "To my granddaughter, Christina Hayes, who visited when no one else did, who read to me when I forgot the names of my books, who brought warmth when the house felt like a tomb, I leave the remainder of my estate." The room fell into stunned silence. Arthur continued, unwavering. "This includes all assets, accounts, properties, shares in Hayes Technologies, and the family trust, totaling $118 million in evaluated value. I have made this decision with full sound mind and an even fuller heart." A chair scraped violently. Meredith was on her feet, red-faced. "This is a joke," she barked. She barely counts as family. She didn't even grow up with us." Arthur glanced at her, then looked back at the will. Mr. Hayes anticipated this reaction. There's a notarized video and a signed affidavit reaffirming his wishes. This is his voice, his truth. They all turned to stare at me now. No more whispers, no more jokes, just eyes wide with disbelief. And yet, all I could feel in that moment was the warmth of Grandpa's hand on mine, the way it used to be when he'd squeeze it and whisper, "You matter more than they know." Turns out he made sure the world would know it too. I could feel every pair of eyes drilling into me. It was strange how only moments before I'd been invisible. A shadow in the corner, a girl in a faded sweater. Now I was the thunder that broke the calm. Meredith hadn't sat back down. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "She manipulated him," she said at last, her voice trembling not from sadness but from rage. "She took advantage of an old man who didn't know what he was doing." Arthur raised an eyebrow, unbothered. "Mr. Hayes had a full mental evaluation performed 6 months before signing this version of the will. Clean bill of health. The video documentation is dated, time-stamped, and witnessed." I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. The truth was my armor, and they were flailing now, desperately trying to pierce it with dull arrows of accusation. Meredith's brother, Connor, stood. "Let me see that will myself," he demanded, voice loud with fake authority. "There's got to be a mistake." Arthur handed him a copy, his expression unreadable. Connor skimmed the document, his fingers shaking. As he reached the section naming me the sole beneficiary, his jaw clenched. "This is insane," he muttered. "Dad would never do this." "No," I said quietly, finally stepping forward. My voice was calm, measured, and yet it carried through the hall like a bell. He wouldn't have. Not if you had visited, not if you had called, not if you had been there when he was lonely or scared or struggling to remember his own name. The silence that followed was heavier than anything Arthur could have read from those pages. You all had your chances, I continued. He waited. He watched, and you made it so easy for him to see the truth. Meredith's mother sneered. And what did you do, Christina? Bat your lashes? Feed him lies over tea? I looked at her. This woman who never once called me after my parents died, who referred to me at family functions as Gerald's charity case. I showed up, I said, week after week. I brought his favorite raspberry jam. I helped him learn how to use Zoom during lockdown. I read him the newspaper. I helped him when he forgot how to tie his shoes. My voice cracked slightly, but I didn't stop. I loved him. When he stopped recognizing his own reflection, I reminded him who he was. And when he remembered, he chose me. Arthur didn't interfere. He simply stepped aside and let the words fill the space. And then the most unexpected thing happened. Someone clapped. It was Aunt Linda, a quiet, frail woman who had been ignored for most of the gathering. She was Gerald's younger sister, someone who hadn't spoken since the service. She clapped slowly, deliberately. She's the only one who ever visited me, too, she said, loud enough for the room to hear. The mask began to crack. Not mine. Theirs. They hadn't just lost an inheritance. They'd lost their illusion of entitlement. And I had nothing to prove anymore. The applause from Aunt Linda echoed faintly, then faded into silence thick enough to slice with a knife. I stood tall, my hands steady even as my heart raced beneath my ribs. This moment, this reckoning, had been years in the making, and now that it was here, I wasn't afraid. I was calm. Meredith, ever the self-appointed queen of the family, turned on Linda. "You're siding with her?" she hissed, her tone sharp as broken glass. "She's not even blood." Linda didn't blink. Maybe not, but she was there when none of us were. And Gerald loved her more than he ever loved our cold little gatherings. The room seemed to tilt. Everyone who once looked so sure, so smug. They were unraveling thread by thread. Connor sat back down, white-faced. Meredith's husband placed a hand on her arm, but she shrugged it off violently. Arthur cleared his throat, drawing the room's attention back to him. As the executor, I can confirm that the will is final. Christina inherits the entire estate, including the Thornhill property, the business shares, the accounts, and the art collection. There are no loopholes, no contests, no mistakes, just his decision. A cousin, Rachel, I think, stepped forward. "Wait," she said, glancing around nervously. "What if we appeal? What if we go public?" I turned to her gently but firmly. "Then you'll be publicly contesting a dying man's wishes. And I'll release every letter, every voicemail, and the full video recording of his final statement, where he names you all by name and explains why he chose me." She paled, then stepped back into the shadows. They wanted to fight, but they had no weapons left. And the real shift came when Arthur opened a second envelope, one not marked for the estate, but for me personally. He handed it to me with a small smile. "From Gerald. He wanted you to read it now." My fingers trembled as I unfolded the paper. "Christina, if they're hearing this, it means I've already gone. And that you stayed, like you always did. You gave me something none of them could, peace. Not because you wanted anything, but because you simply cared. I saw the way they looked at you. I saw how they dismissed you. But I also saw your strength. And I want the world to see it too. This fortune, it's not a reward. It's a tool. Use it to build, to uplift, to protect, and when they ask why you, remind them, it's never about blood, it's about love. Yours always, G." Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't cry because this wasn't grief. It was clarity. The family didn't speak again. One by one they left, hollow, defeated, stunned by the realization that everything they assumed was theirs never was. I stayed behind in the empty hall, the letter still warm in my hands. I wasn't just an heir. I was chosen. After they all left the room, Meredith seething, Rachel stunned into silence, and Connor refusing to meet my eyes, I found myself alone with Arthur, still seated, calmly reviewing documents like nothing seismic had just happened. "I always knew Gerald favored you," he said without looking up. He didn't exactly hide it. I turned to him surprised. He didn't? Arthur smiled faintly. He'd mention you in almost every meeting we had. Told me how you used to bring him soup when no one else visited. How you knew his routine better than his nurses. And how once you defended him to his own son when they fought. I remembered that moment, how Gerald had argued with Uncle Philip over selling one of the old houses. Everyone treated Gerald like a senile old man, but I had stood by him because I listened, because I knew his memories were more important than someone's profit margin. He left you more than money, Christina, Arthur added, now locking eyes with me. He left you with his name, and in this family, that's everything. My throat tightened. Gerald Thorne wasn't just my grandfather. He was the one person who saw me, really saw me, when no one else cared. As Arthur gathered the rest of the files, I wandered into the grand dining room, where the portraits of ancestors loomed over the mahogany table like silent judges. I stopped at the one of Gerald, painted when he was in his 40s. Strong jawline, sharp eyes, the same spark I used to see when we played chess in the sunroom. I placed my hand gently on the bottom of the frame. "Thank you," I whispered. "I'll make you proud." Just then Anna, the quiet housekeeper, entered with a tray of tea. She gave me a soft smile, her eyes kind. "I always thought you were his favorite," she said, setting the tray down. "He used to ask the cook to make those lemon tarts you liked whenever you were visiting." I let out a laugh through my tears. "He pretended they were for him," Anna smiled. "He never did like sweets, but he'd eat them just to keep the secret." It hit me then. The subtle ways Gerald had always protected me, honored me, prepared me. Not with grand gestures, but through quiet acts of love no one else noticed. And now, the whole world would know. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally had a voice. The next few days passed like walking through a dream, or a minefield. The news spread faster than wildfire. Christina Thorne, secret heir to the Thorne estate. Headlines were everywhere. Tabloids guessed I was some lost love child, while business papers speculated how I'd handle the inheritance. But nothing compared to the storm inside my own family. They called, texted, showed up. Meredith came first, not to apologize, of course, but to negotiate. She stood at the gate in heels too high and a face too tight, clinging to the same superiority she'd used to belittle me since we were kids. "You know, I never meant what I said back then," she purred, clutching her designer handbag like it held moral weight. "We were children, Christina. We made mistakes." I raised an eyebrow. "I don't remember you ever apologizing for those mistakes." Her eyes narrowed, lips pursed. "This is bigger than us. There's a family name to uphold, a business to protect." Ah, there it was. She wasn't here for me. She was here for the Thorne name, the empire my grandfather left behind, and the fact that I now held the keys. I didn't let her inside. Later, Rachel sent a long email filled with false sweetness and corporate buzzwords. Collaboration, honoring Gerald's vision, strengthening family legacy. She even attached a proposed organizational chart where I would serve as figurehead, advisor, while she naturally retained full executive control. I laughed out loud reading it. Connor, the only one who ever showed a hint of decency, stopped by without notice. He waited in the rain, no umbrella, soaking wet and pale. "I didn't know," he said the moment I opened the door. "I believe you," I replied quietly, "but you didn't stop them either." He didn't argue, just stood there, defeated. I think that hurt more than anything. The worst part, none of them asked how I was doing. None of them wondered how it felt to grow up invisible and suddenly be everywhere. None of them remembered the little girl they used to ignore at family reunions, the one Gerald always saved a seat for. But I remembered. And I remembered the promise I made at his bedside, just days before he died. "I won't let them twist what you built," I had whispered, holding his hand. "I'll protect it." And now it was my turn, not out of vengeance, out of love. I didn't find it until nearly a week after the will reading. Tucked inside a weathered, leather-bound book, Great Expectations of all things, was an envelope with my name on it. Only my name. Handwritten in the kind of cursive no one teaches anymore. "Christina," it read, in the same steady, slanted hand I'd seen on every birthday card he ever gave me, to be opened when the noise dies down. I sat in the sunroom, the same place where we used to sip tea in silence. My hands trembled as I peeled it open, revealing a single page. No lawyer talk, no pretense, just him. My dearest Christina, by the time you read this, the vultures will have circled. They'll be confused, furious, maybe scared. Let them be. I never gave my life to this empire to see it pass to cold hearts and shallow minds. I built it to protect people, to create something lasting, something real. And you, my girl, you were the only one who ever sat beside me without asking for anything. You listened. You helped in the garden. You saw me when I felt most forgotten. They saw a bank account. You saw a man. You're going to hear terrible things. They'll say you don't belong, that you're just the girl who used to hand out lemonade at family parties. Let them. Because I saw what no one else did. Your strength, your patience, your fire when it mattered. You were never invisible to me. Never. You were my light when the rest of them brought shadows. You're not just the heir. You're the legacy. Use it well. Love, Grandpa G. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the drops hit the page. All my life I'd questioned my worth, been made to feel small by people who barely remembered my name. But in that moment, I understood something deeper than money, deeper than status. Gerald Thorne didn't choose me to punish them. He chose me because he saw me. The letter didn't give me power. It reminded me I already had it. And now, it was time to act like it. The days after the will reading were a blur of headlines, legal noise, and endless commentary. My name trended for 48 hours straight. Everyone suddenly had an opinion about Christina Thorne. News anchors, bloggers, even former classmates pretending to remember me. But in that chaos, 3 people reached out quietly. No cameras, no fanfare, just honesty. The first was Anna, Grandpa's nurse for the last 6 years. She came to see me with a small notebook in her hand. "He talked about you constantly," she said with a warm smile. "Not about the money, never about the business. He talked about your laugh, your stubbornness, how you made him feel like he wasn't just the old man in the room." She handed me the notebook. Inside were recipes, soups I used to cook with him, little jokes we wrote together in the margins, personal things no one else could have understood. He said this was your legacy too. The second visitor was Mr. Walker, the estate gardener. I remembered him as the quiet man who once gave me a sunflower when I was 8 and sad about my parents leaving early. He tipped his hat and said he was proud of you, kid. Said you had more roots than any of them ever will. And the last was Michael. He was Grandpa's former attorney, the one who'd helped draft the original will before the newer, secret one. I hadn't spoken to him since I was 16, but he sat in my office, now mine, and said something I'll never forget. Gerald knew his empire was made of glass in the wrong hands. You've got steel. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice anymore. It was about honor, and remembering the quiet few who saw me long before the spotlight did. Because in a world full of people shouting their worth, the real ones don't need to scream. They just show up. And I was ready to step forward. My name is Christina Thorne. And yes, that Thorne. The boardroom looks different now, not because I changed the drapes or replaced the intimidating leather chairs, but because the energy shifted. The vultures who once circled my name like prey now sit quiet, attentive, respectful. I didn't just inherit a fortune. I inherited a legacy that was never meant for greed. It was meant for someone who remembered where it all began. In the greenhouse behind my grandfather's estate, where we used to plant lavender and tomatoes. Where he once told me, wealth means nothing if it forgets how to be human. The people who laughed at me that day, polished and smug in their designer suits, have all faded into the background. Some resigned quietly, some were removed publicly, and a rare few, apologized with sincerity and walked away to start anew. I still walk past the old portrait of my grandfather that hangs in the east hallway. I nod to him sometimes, like we're sharing a private joke. Because he always knew, that the little girl they dismissed, the teenager they mocked, the woman they ignored, was the one person strong enough to lead with heart. Now, when I sit at the head of the table, I don't think about revenge. I think about responsibility. I think about Anna's notebook, Mr. Walker's sunflower, Michael's words, and I think about the next girl walking into a room full of people who think she's not enough. May she remember this. You don't need their approval. You need your truth, and when it's time, you take your seat. You earn nothing, because it was yours all along.